Welcome to another episode of the Say It Sister podcast, brought to you by Wise Women Lead founders Karen Harris-Kelly and Lucy Barkus.
This is your space for real, unfiltered conversations about womanhood, the messy, the magical, and everything in between.
We're here to talk about existing, thriving, and empowering ourselves and each other by connecting to our experiences and truths, and saying them out loud, so that we can feel and heal. We're called upon to name the taboos, stigmas, stereotypes, and lies that keep us stuck, so we can rise and reign like queens.
Because when women share, we hold space, inspire action, and create change. We open up spaces and deepen relationships that bring us closer to love and a better world for all. So get comfy, grab your favourite drink, and let's say it, sister. Welcome, sisters. It's great to be back. And before we get into today's topic, I want to give out a big shout out to a fellow podcaster, Lisa Jedden. She's actually going to come on to a future episode with us, but we just want to celebrate her podcast, Meno Positive. We are all about supporting other women, so we wanted to just highlight this and point to that direction. And as we record this, it is Menopause Awareness Month, so there's an extra bit for you.
Today, we are going to talk about raising our voices and speaking our truths, as always, and leading fully. And we're diving into something that every single woman has experienced, but rarely talks about. And it's certainly true for myself and Lucy in every single, part of contact with women. There is that frog that comes up in the throat area, and it can feel tight. There can be hesitation. It can even just almost like totally take over the voice box and take things, take our words from us in the moment. And it's a truth that needs to be surfaced when that happens. It's something that can feel like it's holding us back, but it's almost like the words are so powerful and important that something happens here. And without knowing what to do about it, we can get very stuck. What do you think, Lucy?
Well, I'm not backwards and coming forwards. Often I speak and then think later. Sometimes I don't even think later. It's only when I listen back to the podcast, I'm like, did I actually say that? So I know that I just chatter, but actually when it comes to the really important stuff, I have had that voice box imploding on me many, many times when all of the thoughts just seem to drain out of my head, and it's almost like I could feel the voice wanting to come up out of my chest and through my throat, and it just gets blocked at the throat. I've had it many, many times. Sometimes I'm glad it happened because of the intense emotional feelings I was having at the time. Other times I'm like, why didn't I just speak up? Why didn't I say it? And afterwards then I go around berating myself. So it's actually really damaging for us to not speak our truth, or at least not, speak it in a rational, calm, regulated way. So yeah, I'm there with you. I'm there with every woman. It happens to us all.
The frog in the throat. What has been your truth when that has arrived? If you can sort of go back and just pull something out for us to give it, to give us examples.
Yeah, there's been times. So for me, it usually crops up when there's some skin in the game, when it's an important topic. So in relationships, it's happened. In work environments, it's happened. And I can think of like many, many times during a bad time in my relationship. I didn't want to say the words out loud. I wanted to say this isn't working for me, or I'm not happy, or this isn't right, what's going on between us. And it just wouldn't come out. The words wouldn't come out. And even like, I feel it. We would like be sat on the sofa together, and I'd be like, my head would be saying, now's the perfect time. This is the time that, you can feel the tension between us. And still the words wouldn't come out, and they usually end up coming out in really unskillful ways, mid-argument or frustration. And it's absolutely devastating, because when it happens in that space, you've got no control then, you're not regulated, and it just gets into something quite horrible. So that's one experience where it does feel like I'm completely disconnected. My head knows what I want to say, my heart knows it, but there's something in the middle, this voice box bit, that just seems to be out of action. And I've also had it in work situations. And I can tell you this one really clearly because it still feels quite heavy for me right now. And I was at the Business Book Awards judging day, and I can't even remember the lead up to the conversation, but there was this really nice middle-aged white bloke who said something overtly racist, but in a very polite way. And a midlife Asian man called him out on it. And it started getting quite tense. And I was just stood there right in the middle of these two. And what I wanted to say was, hey, that did come across as really racist, and I understand why he has reacted like that. Shall we just talk about this? But nothing came out of my mouth, and I knew what I needed to say, and I was just silent. And I know it was for safety, because I don't know, I just shut down, and it stays with me to this day because I wasn't a good ally in that moment, but it was purely for safety.
Yeah, and I think there has to be times in our lives where we give ourselves a break for that, because if we don't feel safe, parts of our body will start to shut down because it's called protection, and the body is just doing what it needs to do. Yes, the things that you want to say, and you're saying them now, so you are saying them and you have taken the learning from that, but you're not in that moment. And I've had that situation too where I've gone, oh my gosh, I didn't say a word. And when you don't say a word, you feel like you're in that compliance place because you've not spoken up. But actually what is happening is so shocking for you and so upsetting that nothing comes up. And I certainly am with you on that. And I don't know a single person who will not know what we're talking about. It's part of being human. We have that safety mechanism inside us that just, will come to our rescue. But sometimes it's not coming to, or is it? We don't know. This is the thing. We don't know what would have happened if we spoke up. Maybe the exactly same thing would have happened, or perhaps there would have been a different path. But the fact that we didn't means that there was something inside us that, said no on this occasion. But it doesn't mean it's always like that, does it? And I think that's what we have to remember. I've certainly lost my voice a lot in my life. There have been so many important things that I should have said that I didn't say. And that still sits with me too. And if I go into like the analysing part and I want to understand, I can lose myself in that. And I just have to get to a point where I just think, you know what, in that occasion, I didn't speak up. And I know it's because it was so huge that I didn't know how to. And I just didn't have that coping strategy inside me, or I was in deep, deep shock. And I think when we go into freeze mode, everything freezes. And just to be compassionate, and say, right, on that occasion, no, you didn't speak up. But there's been so many occasions in my life where I have spoken up. So I also want to applaud myself and everyone that does speak up for that. My examples are things like, I always go into the big examples, but, saying very clearly, this relationship's over, powerful moments. It's like the constriction's there, but the words still can come out. And then there was a time when I was ill in bed in a hospital, and I'd been told by a doctor not to get out of bed and that I needed to stay sort of lying down. And one of the nurses came in and was like, you can get up and go to the toilet now. And I said, actually, I can't. I've been told by the doctor that I'm not allowed to get out of bed, so you can bring me a bedpan. Which is what she then did. And then afterwards I spoke to I don't know who she was, but she came in and she said, is everything okay? And I said, there's some great people at work here that are very supportive, and I need these people around me, and I don't want this other person around me, because actually I'd been handled quite roughly by this nurse. So for me to do what I need to do to heal, can you not send those people in and send this person in, or someone who's like that? And they did and this was in Delhi, it was in India, so it wasn't in the UK. But there was a part of me that was like, all my leadership training came together in that moment where I was able to go, I'm not happy about this. I am going to articulate it. I'm going to ask for what I need, and I'll see what happens. And actually, I got what I needed. So that was a great way of, and it was very uncomfortable because I was in deep distress. I was really scared. I was in India on my own, in hospital. There was just so many different things that were going on in that moment. And I was I'd miscarried, a baby. And so, but it was like something took over me. And I think probably because it was so big that I just thought, you know what? I'm not having this. Not on my watch, and I'm not having it. I will get exactly what I need. So yeah, so that is it's a big example. I think there are plenty of smaller examples that we'll all have around, the tightening in the throat. For me, it's when I'm talking about something I really care about. If I care about something, or if I'm scared, then it will definitely come up, and it can be a micro thing. Yet the experience is still the same in my voice, and I think it's about acknowledging that.
For me, I know definitely it's about around asking for help as well. And when you said about that, it really brought it forth for me. Um, I'm still really rubbish at asking for help. I've been a independent, capable woman my whole life. And every time I have had to ask for help or I've pushed myself, my voice trembling as I do it, sometimes I whisper, sometimes I actually just text it because even then it's too much. And the benefits have always been there because people almost have been wanting to help. They just didn't know how to help me because I'm so capable and strong and
Yeah.
independent. And so that's something that I know about myself now, that every time I will ask for help or ask for something I want or need, my voice will tremble. I will feel it. And I also know now, only over the last 10 years, that what's on the other side is just brilliant and beautiful, because I've had to do it. But yeah, it was during that whole fleeing a toxic relationship, almost being homeless, those kind of things that, like, a bit like yourself, they're the big things. It pushes you to do it. And then afterwards, you're like, oh, I can do this. I can use my voice. I can advocate for myself. Um, but yeah, it's getting that practice of doing it in the small stuff as well. I really agree with that.
It is, and even when we took our break for this podcast and we went off the summer, and then when we came back on the first two episodes that we recorded, I was really shaky. I still spoke up. I still, shared my
You were
truth.
still brilliant.
Thank you. But I was really shaky because I was almost a little bit out of practice. Because what we do is so visible, and we are really sharing from our hearts, and we're not holding back. But it doesn't mean it's easy. So we're stepping into that place of courage and vulnerability, which I think are the same thing, to be honest. Like for me, like Brené Brown talks about this, and it's not two opposite ends of the coin, it's exactly the same. Because for us to be vulnerable, there's a lot of courage involved in that, to say I feel vulnerable in this moment, because we don't know how that's going to be interpreted. So us showing up on this podcast and having all of these very vulnerable, empowering conversations takes a lot of courage, and also the risk-taking element that goes into it. And the only time I shut down from that is when my true safety in the moment is at risk. And it's what we just talked about. So if I think, oh, this is not safe for me, I am not safe in this space, I'm not safe having this conversation with this person, I'm not safe in the house, you're not going to get me risk taking. It's not going to happen. I'm going to be risk aversive, I'm going to be shut down, and I'm going to do everything I can to escape. And I know that about myself. But when I am able to check in and go, no, I'm safe in this moment, everything is well, then you're going to get me stepping forward in a much more courageous and open way. But there's still an element of risk. And I think as human beings, I think we're always trying to weigh it all up. Like, how dangerous is this? Is it dangerous? Is it not dangerous? Am I safe here? If we're not, we need to act. However, there's also a point of going, maybe I'm not 100% sure. Maybe I could say something on this podcast and it could have a knock-on effect and it could impact wider in a negative way. But I'm still going to take that risk, and I'm still going to step forward, even though I've got this constriction in my throat and I'm going all croaky and my voice sounds really weird. I'm still going to do it because what I'm going for, the service element of what I'm going for, is so important to me that I will take that risk. And I think that is really important in the world. And my throat's going a bit funny now. That's really important in the world today because so much is happening on so many levels, and there are, movements to take away our freedoms. And so if we don't speak up, then I would not be able to live with myself. If it was, I'm talking about myself personally, like if I just go, oh yeah, sure, I was part of that, but I didn't really say anything about it because I didn't think it would really affect me, or, whatever we sort of say as to why we shouldn't speak up, or maybe it was too dangerous in the moment. I can't do that anymore. And that's a good part of being older.
After our democracy, or maybe it was just before our democracy episode, I put out a statement on all of my socials just saying, this is me, this is what I believe in, this is what I take a stand for, and I'm not interested in any other views on this particular topic. And I knew it was risky because that's not how we're supposed to do business and networking. We're supposed to be like available to all. And I actually got approached by a peer, somebody I really respect. And they said, why would you do that? And I said, because it was really important to me. And they said, but it might be brand damaging. I said, but I don't want to work with people who have those views about other people. I said, so rather than attracting negative attention, it was me putting a stake in the ground to say, this is what I stand for. And that was a real act of courage, because, and I did pause before I posted, that message. But equally, anybody that knows me in person knows that I will not stand for any homophobia or racism or sexism. And I think that lesson that I had, with that racist conversation where I went blank, it then took me on the journey to say, why didn't I speak up, and what would I do if that happened again? And now I just tell everybody I'm anti-racist. It's like, it's no big deal because I've done the work and gone through it. So this piece about, being safe, there's being physically and emotionally safe. Absolutely. Don't put yourself into a situation that is going to endanger yourself. But I think a lot of the time it's just these social norms about how you should be behaving, what you should talk about and what you shouldn't talk about. Loving the conversation? Make sure you follow us on your favourite podcast app, and if something resonates, share it on your socials or with a friend who needs to hear it.
We'd love to hear your stories too. Find us on Instagram at Say It Sister Podcasters and Wise Women Lead, and let's keep the conversation going, because your voice matters here.
Part of our conversations is like, you get to that midpoint and point in your life and you're just like, I'm done with like talking or not talking about things because that's what society deems as acceptable. If I want to talk about menopause or hot flushes or heartbreak or sexual violence or inequality, I'm going to bloody talk about it, because we don't need that silencing anymore. That's that good girl or good citizen conditioning, and we're good citizens anyway. We don't need to be silent.
Absolutely. And it's amazing what people say sometimes, isn't it? Because they see the boldness and the courage and they think, oh, that's really dangerous. Why would you do that? And yeah, there are points of that where we check it in going, yeah, I don't know. This feels like it's, slightly, it's not an easy conversation to have, or it's not an easy thing to do. Yet we're really committed to showing up authentically, and we wear our hearts on our sleeves anyway. And we've gone to the next level to actually broadcast and, show up on social media and stuff, knowing that the trolls will be there and that the people, that this was a person who was clearly concerned for you. So it wasn't that side of things, and probably quite curious as well, quite curious about why you've done it.
I think it was more about, they saw what I was doing and questioned whether they could do it. They were using me as a mirror almost, because they were probably wanted to be a bit braver. And there was the concern, what will people think? And I don't care.
This is hilarious, because when I first started doing the work with women, and sort of put myself out there as I work with women, I had loads of coaches coming to me and senior people as well saying, yeah, but you're cutting out half of the problem. Why would you do that? Why would you sort of go down that path? And I was like, because it's the work I want to do, and it's women that are coming to me anyway. So they're coming to me. I'm doing this work. I'm on my own journey with my own femininity as well. And why would I not claim it as I work with women? And
they're only half the population. There's not many of them.
It doesn't matter, does it? And I just was like, yeah. And it's okay, because it's someone's genuine opinion. But it's not the first time I've heard it. I've heard it a couple of times. And I just think, I welcome all of that. But for me, there's just something really, really clear about that. I have worked with men. I've done great work with men, you know, but it's not my field of expertise. My field of expertise is working with women, and so many different areas and layers to that now. And I love it because my voice is now starting to, it means so much to me in this moment that I'm getting the frog, because I care so deeply. And I recently had a man, somebody referred me to a man, and he came through and we had the conversation and did a bit of a discovery and everything. And it was a great conversation, but it was like, I had some, like, I'm not sure, and I don't think he was sure. And, he then went with somebody else, and I was like, I'm really happy for you. Congratulations on making the right decision. It was like, it was brilliant because I wasn't his person and he wasn't my person. And there's like a cleanness to that of, if somebody needs my help and wants to work with me, I'll always welcome anyone in. I'm not like shutting the door on people, but there's definitely a field that I work in that is around women and what women are going through, and that's when I am in the spotlight. The rest of it just feels like the usual coaching that people might do, that they can get from anyone, you know what I mean? So why would I limit myself in that way? That's where
And
I
I
go.
think when people, and this is what we get worried about, if we, say what really matters to us, clear that frog and just say it out loud, then we are worried we're going to get that judgment. And when we get questions back, if they're with curiosity, come on, bring them on. But if they're done with judgment, we just
Yeah,
have to learn to say, it's going to happen. People are going to judge us regardless of what we want to do, and that's on them. Over to you, and block them out of your life, because we will always get a criticizer or a judger or somebody who wants to put us down, and that's because they've got to do their own journey. We've got to still speak our truth. And I remember one of the first times I really spoke my truth, and cleared that frog, was actually when I asked for some investment in myself as development at work. And I was probably about 28, 29. I'd got one child at that point. I was really committed to the company, but I also knew that I needed to have some development in me. And I went up to them and said, I want to get ahead. I want to be here for this amount of time, blah, blah, blah. Will you help me get another formal qualification? And they turned around and said, yeah, come up with some proposals and we'll have a look. I thought, well, that was easy. Why,
yeah.
why didn't I do this before? And they paid for my masters, and I spent a year doing
Oh
my
wow.
masters, and there was something in my contract that I had to stay for another 2 years to almost like repay it with service. Um, and all of the ideas that were coming up in my head was like, well, they'll think I'm not qualified. They won't back me as a woman. I should have all the answers and prove myself. But actually, going and saying, I want
Yeah.
to do well. Please, will you invest in me? And they just turned around and said, yes. It was incredible. And I bring that up because I speak to so many women who are afraid to ask for coaching or
Yeah.
to go on a development program or to invest in themselves or take a week off and go and do a development course. And it's, the blokes are just booking it anyway. But
Yeah.
there's something that's blocking us. And I just want to encourage you to say, if that's your thing, just go and ask the question. Just get
Absolutely. If
yourself
we want it,
developed.
ask for it. I do think we have to sort of own it in that way. And if we get the no, we get the no, but
Yeah.
there's still a win because we've asked. And then the more we keep asking and the more we keep asking, it just does get to a place where you're like, you know what, I can do this and I can keep asking. And then someone will say yes. This is what I also learned, like if I keep asking, ask the questions, ask for what you want, you might get 4 no's, but when you get that one yes, it's magical because you've gone through so much already, and then you get the yes and you're like, I made that happen. It feels
Yeah.
so empowering. Sometimes you get the yes straight away and there was no, what was the fear really about? The fear is about getting the no. The fear is about feeling like you've stepped out of line. The fear is about, seeing it as a rejection of not being good enough, and all of that. So that's where the fear lies. But when we step in and we're like, let's see, something magical generally tends to happen. And we want more of that in our lives. And we have to be willing to reach,
And
reach prize.
I think it's important at this point to maybe think about some of the techniques that you and I have learned along the way in terms of in that moment when your voice is contracted or the voice isn't coming through. And I I've been running how to have difficult conversation workshops for years with my clients, and there's one model that I always share with them, and this is about having the prepared difficult conversations, not the ones just in the moment. And I called it ideas. And the first I is about understanding the intention or the impact that you want to have. So often we think we've got to have this conversation, but we haven't really thought through why we need to have that conversation. So once you've got your intention really clear, what is it that you want to achieve as a result of saying these words, or what impact do I want to have? Then it'll help you make that decision whether this is the right kind of conversation, which moves you on to the D. And so then it's about deciding, do I need to have this conversation, or do I need to develop a script or develop myself to be able to have this conversation? The E in the ideas is then having this emotional regulation. And so actually just by doing this prep work of going through the intentions and the decision making, it actually regulates you anyway. But it's making sure that you are in the right calm space, that you can go in an empowered place. Then what you're looking for is the A, which is around, well, what actions can I take forward, or am I going to ask them to take forward? Or if it's not about action, how can we reach alignment together to move forward? But it's always got to have it's got to have a purpose. I'm having this conversation because I want something to change, something needs to move forward. And the final bit, it was originally just idea, and then I put ideas because the S has got to be about the self-care.
Support. I was
Because
going to say support.
no, self-care, because if you're doing something that is that difficult and feels that dangerous, afterwards you're going to be feeling a lot of feels because you've really stepped into that courage. And so absolutely afterwards you need to find a way to just look after yourself, whether it's just go for a walk, take some deep breaths, go and talk to somebody, and get that support, whatever it looks like for you. But I think so often we just bounce onto the next thing and we never really look after that brave inner warrior or warrioress that has just had that really difficult conversation.
Mm.
Now, I know you've got some tips and tools as well. What do you do when that frog comes in your throat?
I acknowledge it. Sometimes I put my hand on it and just give it a little bit of a massage. If it's around the throat, I'm like, ooh. And then I'm like, what is the feeling? And I'll be with the feeling of that. And then what do you want to say to me? And I just and it might just be that it's just a feeling and there isn't any words, and that's great. It might be that there is like words like, this really matters, or I really want this, or this change has to happen now, whatever it is. Now that could be really, if you're sort of in a space where you can slow down a little bit and do that, that's brilliant. But often when this happens, we're normally mid-flow, midway through something. So, that's not always, that's great in a coaching space when you're doing the deeper work. So I always, I'm always like, go away. But actually, if I can't do that, then I have to get into my body, and I have to get into my body really quick, because if my brain starts to, speed up, this is constricted, I'm going to be sitting there like this.
Yeah.
Nothing's going to change. I can promise you that. So depending on if I'm in a meeting or whatever, I need to just move my chair back a little bit, but I will just get my legs and I will squeeze my knees together. So just try that with me now. Squeeze, release, squeeze, release. And what happens is that tension in the body just starts to move through, and you can do that a couple of times. So I used to do that in the corporate world all the time, like the little knee squeezes were brilliant for me, because I just go, okay. And then I could find myself getting back in my body. Then I'm able to sort of still be present, feel this is still shaky, but my body's now moving a bit better. And now I've got my energy, and now I can focus. And then the final one I was going to talk about is the thymus tap. This one is like, if you've gone into like a real flatline and you kind of can't get out. So this is when you're totally like lost all your power. You basically just get your fist and you just thump on that area in the middle of the chest. and your energy is going to return, and it releases stress. And now check in. What can you feel?
I'm a lot calmer. I know that much for sure.
Yeah, because we do want our energy, because I think often it depends on where you are in the energy field, but we do want our energy to be, we want to have energy. We want everything to be moving properly. We don't want to get stuck. We want the movement and the motion in the body. And then
Yeah, I'm a high energy person, so I'm usually quite buzzy. So when I say I'm calmer, that's because I'm probably at the normal rate of other people's energy. Um, and yeah, I feel grounded. I feel like, I can have proper conversations now.
yeah,
So that's a really good tip. And the one that I'd also been shared for a bit like the thigh exercise is actually just put your fingers together and just try and feel all of the ridges of your fingerprint, because again it's just slowing you down and nobody else knows what you're doing there.
yeah,
You're just there fiddling with your fingers, because again, if you're in public you might not want to do some of those techniques, or you're not able to. So there's always something that we can bring ourselves back to ourselves, and I really like the idea of just actually putting my hand on my throat, because I'm always using my hands, and that's something I'm going to take forward. So yeah, thank you for that.
pleasure.
So that's today's conversation over and done with. I love that we have reframed that frog in the throat, and to not be afraid when your voice goes all constricted, because we've got ways out of it now. It's not something to fight. It's kind of like a signal that truth is rising. This really matters.
Exactly. And when we speak those truths, we don't just find relief, we step into steadiness, presence, and authentic leadership.
So if this has resonated with you, as always, keep listening to the podcast, keep practicing our tools and techniques, and most of all,
Keep saying it, sister.
that's it for this episode of Say It Sister. If it moved you and made you think, or made you feel seen, hit follow, share it with a sister, and leave us a review.
And remember, your voice has power and your essence is wisdom. So speak your truth and live a true and empowered life. Until next time, say it, sister.